I first want to learn more about how you got started with fermentation and what sparked that interest.
I think that fermentation has always been fascinating to me because cooking is like it's so immediate. You like have a result right there, but to watch like something do like such a crazy transformation slowly, like sitting in the corner over there. Some of the ferments that we do take a week, some take 2 years. So there's just kind of like it's this amazing like kind of level of transformation. And what we found too is that when making vegan food, there's some flavors, there's some depth of flavors, there's some savoriness and piquancy that you can deliver naturally without the addition of acids like lemon juice and things like that. For example, when you're making vegan cheese, you can make an analog of vegan cheese by making some sort of nut puree and then adding acidulation to kind of get that flavor of like the acidity of cheese. And you can do all these kind of things to find textures, or you can like use cheese cultures and let the cheese culture bacteria sets go to work on the proteins and fats and carbohydrates that are inside of your matrix and make something that is not necessarily exactly like dairy cheese, but has a character of its own that is vegan cheese. To me, that's more interesting than making exact analogs. I'm not trying to make like Swiss or Gouda or something like that. I'm making vegan cheese, which has its own character. Chefs like Karen McCaffey, for example, out of Canada, like what she's doing is like marvelous while like working with cheeses and making cheeses have their own identity. So that was an important aspect for me in like making vegan food, is like to make things that are interesting and have their own identity rather than trying to replicate omnivorous food. And then secondly, like just like finding depth of flavor, like umami, that's like really important to have. So like making misos, using koji for finding protein savoriness, to break down the proteins that are in vegetables and to make them, to have the amino acids be more readily available, not only on your palate, but also for nutrition. So as far as getting started, I think that when I worked at the Red and Black Cafe some time ago, we had a Reuben sandwich on the menu. It was a tempeh Reuben, and it had sauerkraut that we were buying. And I was like, guys, we could make sauerkraut. And I just started making them in like soy sauce buckets down in the basement. And that was like 18 years ago. And then and then certainly when I opened up Portobello, I was like interested in fermentation, but I really didn't have the skills to do it. So I would like buy fermented pickles and things like that from local makers. But it wasn't until Farm Spirit came that I really, really got into like doing more fermentations, making tempeh, making koji, and also doing like shoyus and garums and all that kind of thing to try to like add layers of flavor.
So with Farm Spirit, unfortunately I never got to go to Farm Spirit, but I guess what exactly made you decide to kind of transition into fermentation? Like what was maybe one of the first dishes that you started to play around with that you were like, I really want to go down this avenue a little more?
It started with cheeses. And I think that one of the things too is like there's lots of products available, but we wanted to be able to exhibit a regional identity. To have a food that speaks to time and place is important. The time is now, obviously, which is to say seasonal, right? The place is here, Cascadia. So when we were trying to make a food that reflects the time and place, we want to use the products that are seasonal and from here, local. So, for example, with tempeh, soy tempeh is the superior tempeh. Tempeh that's made in Indonesia is the superior tempeh. What we make is not trying to be better than tempeh that's made traditionally in the style that Indonesians make it. But what we try to do is to make something that has a reverence for tempeh from Indonesia, but using products from this place. And so when we were like starting to make dishes with like hazelnut tempeh and using local grains like Karma barley that was developed here in Oregon, things like that, it was our way of trying to use traditional craft fermentation techniques that have been developed by brilliant people hundreds of years ago, primarily from Asia, and then show reverence for it, show respect for it, and then do it in a way that also acknowledge where we are here.
And so I guess, so going off of that, I saw in another interview that you did a while back, you mentioned that opening a non-vegan restaurant would be easier because it wouldn't be so niche. It would be easier to get, certain ingredients already made, instead of having to make your own vegan cheese alternatives and whatnot.
Sure.
But you decided to open not just a vegan restaurant, a fermented food restaurant that's even more niche. And so I guess what really compelled you to decide, you know what, I'm going to put in the extra labor, the extra work, and to go further into fermentation and open a restaurant like Fermenter?
Because you got to go hard. I mean, we have one life, right? I mean, like, not to get too, like, sappy on you, but like Mary Oliver said, what will you do if you're one wild and precious life? And for me, what I want to do is to do things that make the world more interesting and beautiful. And so, like, that's not easy work. It's hard work. And I know it sounds like I'm being really hyperbolic, but, like, honestly, like, the people that work here, the things that are produced here, it's hard for people who just walk in and look at the surface and look at the menu, and for them to, like, say, like, oh, it's a hamburger, oh, it's kombucha, like, whatever. People are so used to things just being packaged for them and being here, they don't understand the hours and hours and labor behind it. Sometimes people will take the things that we made for hours and hours of labor, days and days of labor. Like koji beets take a full week to make. Tempeh takes about 2 days. The cheese takes like a few days. The misos take, like a couple months, but they still won't like it. And that's fine if it's not their favorite thing. I think that a lot of people, and like some people's palates are not for it, and that's super fine too. But we want to have a singular, memorable identity, and we want to, again, speak to time and place.
And so with having a place like Fermenter and all the work and love that you put into your food, what would you say is the biggest takeaway of running a business like this?
Don't do it. It's too hard.
Yeah.
I think that I don't make any money. I think people have a misunderstanding about small business people. Luckily, my wife makes a good enough living that we can have a house and things. I mean, that's just real. Do it for love. We don't always hit the mark, but like we try real hard. And, like, are you asking me like what advice I would give to somebody who wants to open a business, or?
I guess in terms of like, even though it's obviously a lot of work, but you still do it, right? And so what is like, I guess the most rewarding thing of having a restaurant like Fermenter, like despite, all the work and the sacrifices that you do for it, like what is the most rewarding thing about having?
Being responsible and being, and I think that I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, like leadership is a submission to duty. If you're a member of the community and you feel like you have a desire to be somebody who's responsible and somebody who has a desire to like submit to duty, then like you're compelled to do it. And so for me, like, I've had ups and downs of like my, I'm a sort of a crazy person. So like, when you deal with people who are doing crazy stuff, sometimes people are crazy, it's just the way it is. But like for what I mean by that is just like, I have bouts of like tons of energy and sometimes I get wiped out, and I'm sure that I'll be doing this until I fall over someday and die. But, it's just the way it is. I just don't know how to do anything else either. Like, I mean, I guess my next job is probably gonna be Walmart greeter because this is my only real skill set, so this is what I'm doing.
But also too, you're such a creative with food, and so I feel like what you bring is also a great experience to people.
I don't think I have to be that creative. I think being creative is a little overrated. I don't really have to be that creative. I just have to like look and see what's there, So like, the people who are really creative are seed breeders. People who are really creative are farmers. That's where the creativity starts. It's the cradle for it. So all I have to do is nurture it. I don't have to I don't have to bore it. And so when these things come to us, it's like, oh, here's an eggplant. Like, it's not hard to figure out what to do with it. It's like, we're going to make an eggplant puree, or we're going to slice it and marinate it and roast it, or we're going to do this and that and the other. I think that people put chefs on pedestals that they shouldn't, because we're just doing our job. And I think that it's a little bit, I think it's silly to give any sort of fame or attention to chefs personally in any sort of way, because we tend to be like lunatics and that are egomaniacs. But I think that honestly, the attention should be more on the people who do a large portion of the work, the people who are the workers in the kitchens, things like that, and also the people who deliver the food to us should get a lot more credit for the creativity of what we produce. We'd be absolutely nothing without them.
And also, I would say that even includes the farmers as well.
100%.
To bring the delicious produce that you cook with.
I mean, that's my main point. I mean, a workshop next door right now, we're serving this Holmes Kusa squash with just light. It's literally just split in half, lightly roasted, and then to order we paint it with a smoked eggplant puree, a tomatillo sauce, fermented Jimmy Nardello, and cashew yogurt. Right? Those flavors are not. Those are Mesoamerican. It's Southwest Asian. There's lots of those flavor profiles exist. They're not me, right? I just know that they're there, right? But the produce list that I get, that example, all that produce except for the things to make the yogurt all come from Groundwork Organics. And then where my mind goes is, okay, Groundwork Organics is in Junction City. What else is in Junction City? Okay, this Lonesome Whistle Farm is in Junction City, not too far from Groundwork Organics. And how they share a similar soil, they share a similar, some sort of history or path, right? And so then I get their Abenaki corn, and then I use the Abenaki corn to make a porridge to pair with it. Now I have a Junction City plate. And so that speaks of a very specific place. And I think that that's where, again, it's not creativity, it's just paying attention and showing care and respect for the ingredients.
And so I feel like that's something I'm sure people would take note in your book, right? You have over 60 recipes that you have in the book, but of course people will learn how to create these dishes, but also what else do you want people to really take away from your book?
I think the big overarching message of the book is it's okay to fail. I think that I've failed so many times. I failed people, I've failed myself, I failed my business, I've failed on dishes, I've failed my partner. Failure is an absolute part of being a human being, right? But I think that people get really crushed by failure. And I think it's important for people to be able to dust themselves off and realize hey, you're not alone. Nobody, no matter how perfect they try to present themselves, is perfect. That you can be okay. There's an example I used to always give. I have a personality where, I'll take a piece of paper and I'll start to write something, and then I say something, so I crumple up the whole paper and throw it away and start over again. Because the presentation you want to give to somebody is that I just did it perfect in one shot. And what I say is cross out the word and rewrite it. Keep going. Show all the mistakes that you've made. Right? Show all the marks. Show the crumpled up paper even and flatten it out. Show all of those failures and those dings and everything like that, and wear them okay. Wear them, not necessarily proudly, but be okay with it, because the more and more you're okay with the fact that you're a complex human being who has the ability to fail, the more likely you're going to be able to be successful. And the reason why is because each failure won't crush you. You'll keep going. You keep going. I can say this to anybody who's cooking, just keep going, because look at me. I'm starting to come into some mild success right now. I'm 48 years old. I'm going to be 49 next March. So some people are rising stars and some people are late bloomers. And I'm a late bloomer. I haven't even hopefully haven't fully arrived yet into where I've realized my career completely. And I hope that I have a few more decades left. I've been in for 30 years. Hopefully I have another 30 years before I expire from this and go into the void. So be okay with fucking up.
And so we've talked a lot about the labor and how much work it is and everything. So what is it about this book that people should, why is it that people should buy this book, I guess, when it comes to taking on this type of cooking and this type of work in the kitchen?
I think that what this book and many other books do, because I'm not going to say like this is the only book that'll do it for you. I think that if you're vegan and you're interested in our perspective, it's going to be a great book to buy. But there's so many books from Jeremy Umansky and Rich Shee and Kirsten Shockley, and like goes on and on to like books by like Joseph Needham and H.T. Huang from like Science and Civilization in China. There's like so many like amazing books that you could get into to learn about fermentation from different cultures and different places. I would say I think that our book is amusing, and I think it offers really fun recipes for people. But I would say like the reason why you want to do these ferments and the reason why you want to make this food is that it's one small link in the chain of human history where we connect the craft of our path to where we are right now. And I think it's really important for us to remain human, and to maintain our humanity is to continue to keep alive our heritage foods, our craft foods. Fermentation is a huge part of that. Clearly, if you look back in time, pretty much all roads lead back to Asia in the creation of fermented foods, and rayed out through trade and rayed out through, war and all sorts of things all throughout the rest of the world. A particular type of fermentation, lactic acid bacteria fermentation and mold fermentations and things like that. There's like alkaline fermentation in Africa and things like that that started off separately. But it's all really cool to explore. I think that when it comes to my book, I mean, obviously I want you to buy the book because hopefully we'll get some money from it someday. But like, it's hard for me to answer. I'm not that great at self-promotion sometimes.
What is a recipe that you feel like people should really start with right away?
I think you should start with lactic acid bacteria fermentation. It's fairly quick, and about like you can have a product in like a week or so. So that would be like sauerkrauts, things like that. And I think also like the versatility of doing sauerkrauts and pickles and things like that people are going to be really surprised. The term pickle gets kind of interchanged with things. When we talk about fermenting, we're talking about using having things in a brine of salt versus pickling, which is using vinegar, right? Both of them achieve acidulation. Acidulation is what makes a food acidulated, which is to say it's more shelf stable. So what ancient folks figured out is that if you take vegetables from right now and you salt them, that inhibits bacterial growth and extends allows the lactic acid bacteria, which is a set of bacterias that go to work on carbohydrates and things like that in vegetables, and as a byproduct create lactic acid, which creates that lower pH, that piquancy that we taste, that acidity that we taste in like a pickle, that sourness, and that also creates an environment that, along with being anaerobic because of the brine, creates an environment that is extending the shelf life of food. So it was out of necessity, and then also turns out it creates like an incredible amount of vitamin C and like makes it more healthful in a lot of different ways. It's probiotic, it's good for your gut. So like all these kind of cool benefits. How cool is that people figured that out? I mean, like one thing I always talk about, and I know I'm going on a lot of rambling, but one thing I always talk about is like, think about koji. Like, what the hell is koji? Koji is a mold that was originally completely toxic to human beings, poisonous. And some people in China, like 2,600 years ago, figured out how to domesticate a mold to make it not only edible, but make it useful. And what it did is that they were able to set that mold onto grains like rice especially, to be able to have that rice be broken down by the amylase that's present in the mold so that the sugars are super present so that they could use that now very sweet rice as a base for making alcohol. And then that they added yeast to that, they made alcohol, and that they continued that and aerated it, they made vinegar, and just goes on and on and on. Like, can you imagine the fact that folks in Okinawa who have live in a warmer environment were able to develop Aspergillus luchuensis, which is a form of the koji mold that works well in warmer environments like Okinawa and has, as a byproduct, citric acid, so that the alcohol that they make from it tastes like citrus, though there's no citrus in it. How amazing is that? People figured that out without microscopes. People are fucking amazing. And that's like another thing that I really like want to get through is like, people are amazing. And you know how they did it? They did it through trial, error, and failure.
And like you said, like you want people to know that it's okay to fail.
It's okay to fail. Look at me, I'm a complete failure.
I appreciate the honesty, but I guess just to wrap up the interview, I guess like what are some of your most favorite recipes in the book, and that you hope that you are excited for people to try at least?
I really want people to make vinegar. It's slow. It takes patience. It takes like tending. It takes care. And the result, especially if you have fruit trees in your yard, or if your neighbor has fruit trees and they let all their fruit like drop on the ground, you can go grab their persimmons or their apples or their pears or whatever. And if anybody lives in Portland is listening, I have an orchard ladder you can borrow. Just send me an email. And then just go over and pick some fruit and then put it into a big thing and let it ferment into vinegar eventually through a couple of processes. But like that's just like a really cool one. I think that when somebody makes something like their own vinegar, how empowering is that? Right now, where we're at with our food systems is that people are very, very beholden to corporate interests. People who are homogenizing and trying to like grab lots of share, right? So then my generation, Gen X generation, like we're really into DIY, do it yourself. So like do it yourself and like feel how cool it is when you have your pantry full of like your own apple cider vinegar, and it tastes so different, by the way. It tastes so much better. So I think getting people into doing vinegars, and then similarly getting them to do kombuchas and water kefir, because those ones are much faster. Water kefir you can turn around if you have water kefir grains in 2 days. You know, you have water kefir in 2 days, and you can continuously brew water kefir, and it's very helpful for your gut. So I would say like those are two things I think. The other ones, lactic acid bacteria ferments, like sauerkraut and stuff like that, are cool and everything, and I think it's a really easy entree, and I think it's a good way to go. But like, if for interest, I'd say those two. And then when they get some equipment, then they can go to the book and they can learn how to make tempeh. They can learn how to make koji beets, like we do the Reuben. Once you learn how to make miso, lactic acid bacteria ferments, and koji charcuterie, you can make your own Reuben, right? Then you don't have to come here and buy from this jerk over here. You can just go and make your own at home. That's a nice feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like you said, it's very empowering to be able to complete these kind of processes and make your own food in that way.
Heck yeah.
So, finish the sentence. Fermentation is craft. And to me, that's one of the compelling reasons why I do it.